Hi, Misha here, and last year I kind of covered all the types of stormtroopers and imperial officers. Let's kind of do the same thing for clones. It's just a bit of a repeat, sure, but I kind of felt like talking about them, and they were out here at the cabin. So, some canon, some head canon, but let's see where it goes. Just having some fun, why not? And here we have kind of the three generations in the Black Series of the Phase 1 clone trooper, with the most recent version just out about a year ago now, and the earliest version way back at essentially the beginning of the series. And in the beginning, these were clones in almost every way. Yes, we know they were all cloned from Jango Fett, almost all identical, although there would be minor variations like hair color, eye color, slightly taller, shorter. And of course, they were double timing on the growth. Started in 32 BBY. They were right at the age of 20, give or take, when the Battle of Geonosis kicked off, 22 BBY, and there were about 200,000 clones ready for combat, having trained their whole lives. Most of them were sent to Geonosis, and another million were almost ready, and orders would actually continue with the final clones leaving their, growth chambers right after the rise of the Empire. And while they were made a little bit more docile, a little more kind of following orders, a little more patriotic compared with Jango, they left their independence intact as much as possible, including their reproductive organs, because, neutering, castrating is not good for things. They also gave them better lung capacity, faster reaction times, improved their eyesight, although each clone would be specialized. That said, with Phase 1, they pretty much all looked the same, even if they did different roles. The armor was pretty much all white, and any coloration would denote the rank. That was the idea in the beginning. If you were a private or a corporal, you were just in all white. If you were a sergeant or a master sergeant, you would be in kind of an OD green, at least striping. If you were a second or first lieutenant, you were a blue. And if you were a captain, or in some cases major, although captain was much more common, you were red. And finally, if you were one of the ranks of commander, marshal commander, you were wearing yellow. As you might imagine, announcing to everyone on sundry who is in charge worked well in training, not so well in practice. Again, this is the earliest version from the Black Series. Somewhat limited articulation, although some preferred its proportions. And the Phase 1 armor was designed by the Kaminoans based on Mandalorian shock trooper armor, which itself was kind of based on a flight suit. So we have kind of a under the armor body glove, which was more or less vacuum sealed. And then on top of that, magnetically attached were 20 plastoid armor plates designed to be as light as possible, but also take a hit, with the heaviest plate being the chest plate. This is the one that might actually take a direct hit from at least a medium blaster or light laser. Although, to be fair, the armor's main goal was to protect against gas, other chemicals, some radiation, light vacuum, extreme heat, cold, a little bit of kinetic impact damage, and mostly debris, shrapnel, that kind of thing, which is, a major concern on any battlefield. And it also had a utility belt carrying extra cartridges for the blaster, wet wipes, tools, small medical kit, and whatever else. At this point, they're very uniform. Oh, and usually they had one thermal detonator or similar grenade on the back, and then a small power source for the outfit there. And the helmet, the most distinctive part of the Phase 1, was a pretty advanced piece of kit. The fin on top was not just decorative, it was there as part of the communications array, the antenna. Also the tracking for the individual soldiers, comms and all that good stuff. And that's because inside on this Mandalorian inspired visor, it was a heads-up display, even with menus that the clone could toggle through with his eyes and other kind of gestures. The suit was technically sealed up and could provide atmosphere, breathing air in an emergency for 10, maybe 15 minutes. So it wasn't really meant for space operations, but if something happened in the interim, yeah. And again, all your clones, despite their specialty, wore this kit in the beginning at the Battle of Geonosis. So it was kind of a one-size-fits-all. And it was designed with care, but it was also designed by a species that was not human, and it was designed and built in peacetime. And there are pros and cons to that, as we'll see as we move through the iterations. So that's the defense the clones had. What about their offense? Here we have the second version that came out about 4 or 5 years ago. And while it does have greatly improved articulation, especially with the pads, some felt it was a little kind of disproportional and scrawny. Be a little criticisms. You're never going to make everyone happy. Anyway, he's holding the DC15A, the standard clone blaster, and definitely a rifle. Heck, this thing was about 1.3 meters long, so big. Although, despite being as tall as some humans, it wasn't actually that heavy thanks to advanced lightweight construction, under 10 pounds. Again, for the size, yeah. He used Tabana glass, and of course during the Clone War they would kind of calibrate it to go against the droid army specifically. It held up to 100 standard shots, 50 on high power. It had kind of a variable yield. It could also be semi-auto or full auto, plus it had a stun mode. It had an optional scope, which is often stored under the barrel and not needed. It could also be mounted on a tripod or have a grenade launcher. This thing had a very good range combined with the targeting reticules in the helmet going several kilometers, and it could punch about a half-meter wide hole in solid material on its higher power settings. On the other hand, it wasn't all that great at rapid fire. It was more of a slow, controlled, aim, powerful shot type gun, and of course it is just a massive weapon. But again, peacetime, just like with the armor, some things worked, some things didn't. And even though the concept came from the Kaminoans and Jango Fett and the Mandalorians, basically it was subcontracted out to Blaztech, who made it exclusively for the Grand Army of the Republic. And so it was their unique identifiable rifle, although a fancy wood furniture version would be also used by the Senate guards and some other special police and guard forces. And at this time, pretty much all your different clone specialists wore this armor, with a few exceptions. Your clone pilots and drivers had just a lightly modified version. Your advanced reconnaissance forces, your ARF troopers, used essentially Phase 1 armor. Again, your commanders and privates all wore the same armor with just very minor modifications. Phase 1 could be adapted a little bit and have a few accessories clicked on, but it was pretty much a sealed, fixed, unit, as it were. and it was also pretty heavy. And ending with the third version. This is about as well respected in the community as any of these, kind of addressing some of the issues of the second one, but also giving as good or better flexibility. Still at this time, the DC15A is the only weapon million mass issuance. And, well, that's really about it. Yeah, you're stuck with it. And this one does have a removable helmet. The other two do not. So there's your standard clone guy. This is just meant to be a generic clone. In theory, all the same, but again, minor variations. And that was one of the things that would mean that design needed to continue past the initial armor phase. These were not terribly comfortable. They did protect the wearer quite well, and they were very advanced. They were well crafted, but they were heavy for what they were. The plates were just solid blast steel plates, and sometimes a little bit overkill here and there. The torso, the crotch, the upper thigh areas were not really conducive to seating, moving around, long durations. Pretty much good for standing only, which meant for pilots and reconnaissance scouts, all those guys, it just was not a long-term viable solution. And so they were sometimes very derisively called body buckets, kind of giving the idea of just being put into something immensely uncomfortable. But again, the clones trained with them since birth, and they were designed for them. Everything was designed for the Grand Army, including the lot drop ships. They originally flew the V-19 Torrent fighter, and of course they had the acclimators, and the Battle of Geonosis would just be the beginning. And for the first year to year and a half of the war, this is what they had to work with. This blaster and this armor for good or ill. But it cost a lot of money to literally clone a clone and train them. And they were amongst the best warriors the galaxy ever created, so they would already be working to improve things right after the first in-combat engagements and feedback from the troopers. And of course, that gets us to Phase 2 in the next video.